Welcome to lesson 5 and lesson 1 through 4. We talked about concepts, the PIV loop, the full stack mental model, building foundations first. Now we're going to actually build something. Here's the twist. We're going to prompt Claude Code and watch it create a complete feature from scratch. By the end of this lesson, you'll see files appear in the sidebar. A database table get created. API endpoints that work, tests that pass. All of this from a single prompt. Okay, let's do it. As we said in the introduction, we're in lesson 5. I'm going to start at the very beginning here. I'm in VS Code. Hopefully you have used VS Code before, and so you might have used Cursor, Windsurf. All of these are pretty much the same as far as the way you use them. Cursor and Windsurf, I should say, have different features. They have AI built in, where VS Code doesn't. But those are clones with additional features of VS Code. I'm going to use VS Code in this series because it's the foundation, and you can use some of the others. I do sometimes. I use Windsurf. I don't use Cursor much anymore. I do use Windsurf, and so I understand. If you have questions about that, I can answer those as well. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to the directory where we want to actually put the repository that we're going to clone. And so I'm going to put that here in this directory. And so I just pull it down from my Finder. I'm on the Mac. And you can see that I'm in that directory. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to clone that repository. So I'm going to copy and paste this in. And you can see, okay, we're there. And then we're going to go to that directory. And then now we'll pull up the code. Okay, now you can see here our repository. We're going to be working on the backend today, as I indicated in the intro. And we're going to add some files to the backend, put some information in the database. So you can see that this foundations can be a foundation for any agentic AI. And what the things we're going to be doing today are fairly simple, but hopefully you can see that these things can be built upon. And so we're going to do that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to be using Claude Code as our coding assistant. And there's, of course, many different coding assistants now, Codex and Cursor, Windsurf, and all of those. I use Claude Code most of the time. I have used some of the other. I use Codex every now and then, but Claude Code is the main one I use. And further down the road, you'll see why I might use Claude Code as opposed to some of the others. I think the consensus is that as far as programming is concerned, Claude is the Opus 4.5, and most of the models are further ahead of some of the other models that you might have. So, if you want to use the best right now, that's not my opinion, but that's kind of the opinion of the coding world, that right now Claude Code is probably the best one. And so I'm going to go to Claude Code. Now, if you don't have Claude, you don't have a subscription, you have to go to Claude.ai and get a subscription. I think you need at least $20 subscription to actually access Claude Code. You might can do it with the free one, but I think you need at least the minimum to access it. Let's see, we're going to here. And you can see right here, I'm going to use this in the dangerously skip permission. So in Claude Code and most of the coding assistants, they keep asking you questions about, do you want to do this? Do you want to allow this file to be created and so on and so on? Well, I don't want it to ask me those questions. Since we normally what we would do in a case like this, if we were to use this mode, is that we maybe use something like a Docker container or something like that. So we're going to live dangerously a little bit today. Not really, because all the changes that we're making are fairly simple. But if you're going to do some major, you probably don't want to run it in this mode without maybe using some containers so that Claude Code won't inadvertently get into some of the other files and delete some files that you don't want it to delete and maybe create files that you don't want it to create. So we're going to live a little dangerously today. And so we get into Claude Code. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute as far as our coding, and then we'll get back to it in just a minute. But I wanted to go through a couple of things before we continue with our coding. So we'll be right back to our coding in probably a couple of minutes. So we'll look at a couple of other things. I want to go through the query or the prompt that we're going to use in Claude Code. And I also want to talk a little bit about Docker, because you're going to need Docker for this exercise. If you hadn't downloaded it yet, you have to download that. So I'll talk about those two things, then we'll get back to Claude. We'll get back to Claude Code. This is the prompt that we're going to be using in Claude Code to create the task features that we want to. We're going to copy and paste this into Claude Code exactly. And one thing we have in our repository is this example to use as a reference for Claude Code. One thing these coding assistants, they love examples and patterns and things like that, because they can follow those much better than, say, if you just give it some textual description. They can see an example, we'll follow those examples very closely. And we're going to create a new feature called task, and we're going to put it in this directory in that particular structure. And we have the database structure here, the ID, the title, description, status, and created, added, and updated information. So that's going to be created in the database. Well, it's going to create a database and a table and put this information in. And then the files that's going to be created. The idea of this vertical slice where we put everything that's associated with a particular task in the same folder, so that if we need to change something, we can do that just in that folder. We don't have to look all over all the different folders for the model, say, for example, and then another folder for the schemas, another for the routes, and so forth and so on. And then these are just the things that we want Claude Code to do as far as completing the task. And I asked it to show the results at each step so you can follow and see what it's doing. So I'm going to create a repository for the lessons. And in that repository, I have folders. For example, I have folder lesson 5. And in that folder, I put this particular document along with some other documents that maybe I think will be useful in completing this lesson. So we're going to get back to Claude Code now and complete our lesson. We're back in VS Code. We look here, we're on our backend. We're going to be working on that. And a couple of things before we get started. I talked about talking about Docker. We have Docker here and got some Docker associated. This is a file and some other things associated with Docker. You're going to have to download Docker as a, well, it has a lot of different jobs. One thing that we're going to use it for here is as a Postgres database. So don't worry about knowing everything about it right now. We're going to be talking about Docker quite a bit in this series. So for right now, just download it and install it in your computer. And also here, I added a directory features. This is where we're going to be putting our files that we create or that Claude Code creates. It wasn't in the original repository, so you have to add it here under apps. So apps is under backend apps, and then put in this directory features and give you some experience in actually putting in directories in your code. So we're going now to go ahead and paste in our prompt and start Claude Code. We can see this is basically what we had before. And I'm going to let it run here. We're going to be able to see as it adds files, folders and files to this features. This is one thing we wanted to do in this particular. All right, you see it already. It's already started. But we have tasks already, and it's going to add some other things to this features directory. And then we're going to put some things in the database, and we're going to be able to look at those things, or at least know that they're there from the information we get here. I'm going to let this run a little while. If it starts getting too long, I'm going to stop the recording, and we will come back so that you don't waste your time. But I want you to see some things that's happening here, especially as we get more files here. You'll be able to see that. And I did ask it to give me information about what it was doing, give me feedback. You can see that it's writing all of these files. They should be in here now. Okay, you can see them right there. So you saw where it told, Claude Code say, well, I'm writing these things, and then they appear here. So hopefully this thing won't run too long. Let me see. I don't want this video to be too long, and we have some other things we want to get to. So I'll let it run a little bit more. It's actually setting up the database. There's some kind of error here, but it's going to fix the error. Our database doesn't exist, so you can see we can start the Postgres SQL by Docker and create the database. So it's going to be doing that. And then there's a Docker authorization issue, and it should fix that. And now we have the Docker container running on 5433. So you can see database URL points to localhost 5433. If create database, it's going to do all of that. Database created. Now let me create the migration and able to put things into the database. That's what this does. I'll talk more about that at some point. But right now, with this particular video, I just wanted to be able to go through these things, and we'll take probably one lesson just to talk about some of the things that are happening in this particular video, and maybe in the next one or two. And then we'll wind things up with just a an explanation video, an explanation lesson on all the things that we've seen here. Because then you'll have more familiarity with what's going on, and you'll be able to try some of these things yourself. So let me pause the recording, and then we'll get back as soon as it's finished. Okay, we're back. We can see that Claude Code has done its thing. It's done all the checks. Let me also run Pyrite. Did that. And it created task feature files. All that's been done. Registered router. It registered the router to the main.py. You can see all the things that the service started and so on. This is the database verification here. That's great. Everything passed all the tests. You can see the success. MyPy, Pyrite, rough, test. Everything is great. So 0 errors, 0 warnings. So that's what we want. And so now I'm going to ask it to give me the links. The various ports that it created. I thought it should be about, I thought sometimes it gives you the links and sometimes it doesn't. So see here. So this is fast doc. Let's just see what that does. You'll be able to see all that. Okay, so we have the AI foundation, and this does what it does. All this wasn't there before. I'm not going to go into all of these things. These are just little tasks that we set up. And we can go into some of the others. Maybe do one more here, maybe the hip. Okay, there we go. And you can see the information that's in that we have at the task. And you can kind of go through all of these. Like I say, it's not that important what we're doing because we're just, doing some tasks just to show really how these things work. And you can see the connection to the Postgres the database and through Docker. So that's really all I wanted to show as far as this goes. We already looked at the files, the task, these files that were created. You can see some of the other things. And so everything seemed to be working great. So our foundation, so far, so good. And one other thing here, let's do a very quick code tour through what we've done here. We can do in VS Code, you can do a code tour through some of the things. So we're reviewing the task features. So let's kind of go through that very quickly here. You can see that everything is in one folder. This is the idea of the vertical slice architecture. That's what we're shooting for here. And so when you make a change, the idea of vertical slice is that when we make a change, everything is in one place and we don't have things spread all over the place. I'll talk about that later. And you can see the key elements of Claude Code included in what we had, the primary key and all of that, setting up the database. dynamic schemas, the API layers. This is how we get information, how we post stats, create tasks, send information out, get information back, that kind of thing. So we set that up where the work happens. So this is the core of the feature, the safety net, checking everything, connecting to the app, the database, changing the database schema, and then all the checks. We got the vertical slice, we got the model schema. So everything checks out great. So we can go through the code. We can do what we call a code tour, and look at everything and make sure everything is okay. So we're going to wind up that. Okay, we're going to wind up this lesson. I guess it's going really long enough. We're going to just review a few things. What we've done here, this is how we're connecting to the overall series, of course, if you want to call it that, is a PI. We can see the PIV loop in action phase and what's happening in the lesson. A plan, you write the prompt describing what you want, and then you implement it. Claude Code creates the file and runs the commands, and then you validate it with curl requests, database checks, and test proof that it works. So some of the guardrails, we saw those as we modify tests. Our data schemas were enforced, so that play out. The login service.py includes structured log events. So we have that covered. And then we have the vertical slice structure where we put the tasks that are associated, all the things that's associated with that task, everything in one folder so that when we have to make changes, we don't have to go to multiple folders. And like I said, I'll talk more about that later. So the idea is foundation first. The reason this works is because we have a template, we have an example, which I told you those are very important as far as these coding assistants. The database infrastructure is already in core. We talked about that logging and infrastructure. We talked about that in some of the earlier lessons. And a lot of it is already configured. Without the foundation, Claude would have to figure all of this out. Without the foundation, with the foundation, it just follows the pattern. So that's what I'm talking about, that if we didn't have all this already set up, Claude would have to figure it out itself. And if you have in this simple example, maybe it could, it probably would. But you can see if you had many tasks like we talked about in the previous lessons where you have, PVI that leads into one PVI, we might have parallel PVIs working at the same time. You can see that if Claude has to figure out all of those different things, it can easily go off and hallucinate. And then we have a problem because once it starts to do that, we can have, problems all over the place. We don't know anything about what we have. As long as we can keep up guardrails around it, even if we have a problem, we can kind of identify and point into that particular problem and fix it. Or either tell Claude Code, can you fix this problem here? Because it seems like there's something's going, awry. So that's the idea, is that we're going to be able to always know what's happening and be able to fix things if need be. Okay, that's the lesson for today. It's lesson 5. If you would subscribe to the channel, give me a like, and notification bell if you want to follow this series. We're trying to do one a day. Sometimes it's every other day, but we're going to have a series out, or a video out in the series every day or so. So follow us.